Paul is the author of this paper, and he's the lead economist on the impact evaluation of AFSP, but unfortunately he couldn't make it to Nepal on time, so I'm here happy to present the results on his behalf, as I'm also heavily involved in this evaluation. So DIME, for those of you who are not familiar, stands for Development Impact Evaluation, and it's a unit within the development research group at the bank that focuses exclusively on impact evaluations. So the Agriculture and Food Security Project is a 5-year project that started back in 2013, and its basic goal is to improve farmers' livelihoods by both increased agricultural productivity as well as improving nutritional practices. It's funded by the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program and supervised by the World Bank, but it's jointly implemented by the Ministry of Agricultural Development and the Ministry of Health with technical support from the FAO. As you can see from the map, the orange area are the 19 mountainous and hilly districts of the far and Midwestern region in which this project is implemented. So a challenging geographical area for project for those of you who are familiar with Nepal. So just to give you an idea of the types of interventions involved in AFSP, from the agricultural side, the main modality to improve agricultural practices is farmer field schools, as well as a variety of other types of crop groups. There's also a NARC-led seed production and improved crop production. From the livestock side, there's been an introduction of improved goat breeds of Boers and Saanen, as well as livestock groups that focus on poultry and milk production. Lastly, from the nutrition side, there are a component from the health ministry is the behavior change communication, which makes use of already existing mothers' health groups at the ward level in all of the districts, as well as revitalizing some groups in areas where they didn't already exist, as well as promotion of home nutrition gardens and village model farms. So this shows the theory of change of the project, and the main takeaway from here is that there are two sort of components overall to both the project and the evaluation. The top row shows sort of the agriculture or supply side interventions, which aim to increase the actual productivity of livestock and crops. And in the bottom row, it shows sort of the theory of change from the demand side interventions, what we call trying to generate a demand for food diversity through BCC that sort of links in with the vegetables and crops promoted through the ag part of the project. So in the fifth column, the complementarities are the most important thing to pay attention to, where we would hope that those households that benefit from both involvement in health mothers groups where there's promotion of nutrition gardens and backyard poultry, as well as the same household benefiting from agricultural interventions that improve productivity and income, we would hope that those households would show the greatest gains in nutritional outcomes. So in line with that theory of change, these are some of the questions that the evaluation aims to answer. The ones in green are the ones that I'll touch on today, and the remainder you can check out our midline report, which will be ready by the end of this month. So a brief overview of the overall design. It's a randomized phase-in of project VDCs. VDCs are village development committees, the smaller administrative level after district level. So out of 190 AFSP project VDCs, 160 are part of the evaluation, and those were roughly half and half randomized to either start agricultural interventions in 2013 or to phase in at a later time in 2015. In addition to the random assignment to the early or late treatment, we also have 68 external control communities, which were not randomly selected, but were chosen based on simple matching, and that is a limitation of the study as well. So we've had 2 rounds of data collection, the baseline being in 2013 in roughly 2,300 households from July to October, and then the most recent midline data collection was just this past fall and collected information from about 3,200 households across our 19 districts. So that was a very comprehensive survey, and very long, included household food insecurity, yield, detailed yield estimates of every crop grown, livestock owned and the production from that livestock, as well as the general nutrition modules, including 24-hour dietary recall and household food insecurity, as well as child anthropometry. So what impact did the project have on access to farmers group across VDCs? We can see from the middle column, which represents the AFSP early starters, that 100% of those VDCs have farmers groups in them, and almost all of the late starters do as well. However, AFSP is clearly not the only source of farmers groups, because we can see in the leftmost column, which is the external controls, that even 65% of the external control VDCs do have farmer groups, because, as we know, farmers groups do exist from government programs and other projects. And in terms of actual participation in the farmers groups, in this slide, the gray represents the farmer groups that are not farmed by AFSP, whereas the blue represents farmers groups that were farmed by the project. So here we see that around 25% in the external controls, 25% of our households reported having at least one member of a farmers group, whereas in our project VDCs, nearly 70% of households we interviewed had a member who joined the group. So there does seem to be a positive impact on the number of people joining farmers groups due to AFSP. To give you an idea of what types of groups they're joining, most people who joined a group were part of a farmer field school, and also in terms of livestock, poultry and goat groups were common, and cereal crops and vegetable production. These were not mutually exclusive, so if someone said that they were part of a farmer field school, it means that the farmer field school covered one of those other topics as well. So you could be in a farmer field school for cereal crops or a farmer field school for goats, for example. So to present the results, we used two specifications, one difference in difference, and then the second an ANCOVA. So we will just dive right into those. Hopefully you can see this, but the main takeaway here is that using a difference in difference analysis, we see a 14% increase in overall household income in areas that had the FSP project compared to the areas that didn't, so compared to the controls. In the second column, it's a little bit hard to read, but we don't really detect any significant difference between the early starters and the late starters, and in terms of the gains of incomes, there's no significant difference. So using an ANCOVA model, which gives us a little more statistical power and ability to detect that difference, we see this time that the shorter exposure, or as we call the late starter FSP groups, actually showed a little bit more of a gain in overall household income. However, the coefficients aren't really that different. So we can't say too much about that, but what we can say is that we still see in the ANCOVA model a 12.6% increase in overall household income in our project households. So the previous two slides only showed the overall income from both livestock and crops, and this table is going into the crop-specific income gains because that's where we see significant results. So the largest gains in crop income are appearing in the groups that were the early starters, so the groups who had the longest exposure to crop interventions, which makes sense. Lastly, unfortunately, we're not seeing any significant impacts on any of our nutrition indicators, such as dietary diversity or food insecurity or minimum meal frequency of children. However, this isn't that surprising because our new BCC side interventions have only very recently started, and also these types of outcomes take quite a bit of time to show movement on. So in conclusion, we do see some fairly sizable gains in overall household income as a result of our FSP intervention, and these are mostly driven by cereal crop interventions, although we don't see too much difference between our long exposure and short exposure groups. As I just said, there's no observable gains on the nutrition outcomes yet, but analysis is ongoing, and we have another round of data collection coming up later this year, and hopefully we'll be able to see some longer term impacts and movement on nutrition after that.